Okay, welcome to the first of our videos on our introduction to programming using the Grok Learning Online course for Introduction to Programming using Python. So this video set is just going to step you through the different modules and some of the fundamental concepts that we need to be familiar with when we are learning about programming. So firstly, we're going to look at what is a computer. So we're going to be programming a computer. So we want to know what a computer actually is and what this device can do. And essentially, a computer program is an ordered set of instructions written to perform a specific task using a computer. Okay, it doesn't matter what the program is or how complex it is, and fundamentally it's a set of instructions that's written by a computer programmer, and that program is is written in a particular programming language, and we call that source code, or we come to use the term code for short. And that code is meant to help the computer perform a particular function, whether it be playing music or doing word processing or playing a game or whatever that might be. At the end of the day, our code has to be interpreted or compiled by the computer, and the computer converts our code into its own language, which is machine language or binary, that you might remember learning a bit about from your Year 7 and 8 digital technologies. So that's essentially what's going on inside of the computer. The job we're going to take, or the role we're going to take, is the one of the computer programmer on the left there in the diagram, writing the source code that the computer will then be able to interpret. So we'll write those computer programs that the computer will use, and it will then convert them into its own machine language or binary to allow them to run. Every program that we're going to look at, or any program that you could think of, any computer program, follows this basic process. We get input that comes from the user in some form, or perhaps being loaded from a file. We take that input and the program does something with it. We call that the process. That process bit in the middle is what we will write our program code to do. Okay, and then that process will produce some sort of output. That might display something on the screen, a computer can make a sound, or we could print something out. There's a number of ways that we could get that output, but that's the basic process that we'll follow. It's not unlike baking a cake. If you bake a cake, the inputs to your cake are the ingredients, the flour, the butter, the milk, the sugar, those sorts of things. The process is the recipe that we have to follow, the ordered set of steps, just like a program. A program is an ordered set of steps, a recipe is an ordered set of steps for getting that task done. And the output, hopefully when we're baking a cake, is a cake that we can eat. Bit different to a computer program, but we still get some output and we still follow those same sort of steps. Every program follows that process. One of the important things up the top there is that input needs to use these things called variables. Right? If we're baking a cake, and we use that analogy, when you get all of your ingredients and you put them in a bowl and you mix them up. The mixing bowl is where your ingredients go, where your inputs go. In a program, we don't quite have a mixing bowl. We need to have somewhere, though, that we can still put our inputs. And that place is what we call variables, which are just a part of the computer's memory that store our input for our program. Variables, the concept of variables is really super important in programming. We use them everywhere. So a variable is just a named place in the computer's memory that we use to store our inputs, our data that the program is going to need to use. So you can think of a variable as a bit like a bucket. Right? It's a bucket that we give a particular name to so that we can refer to it later on. And in that bucket, we can store some piece of data so that the program can use it. The fact that it's called a variable means it's able to change. So we're able to empty out the bucket, tip the contents out, so that it can have other pieces of data stored in it. That's the concept of a variable, and we use them all the time in programming. What's actually going on, though, inside the computer is on that diagram here up the top right. You've got a memory module that sticks in a computer. If you've ever taken the back off a computer and you've seen a stick that looks a little bit like that, that's a stick of RAM, or random access memory. So RAM is where, if you run a program, the instructions for that program get loaded into there so that the computer can work with them. That's also where our variables get stored. So we give those variables a name, and that gives us a little small piece of memory allocated for that particular variable that we can use to store some value inside of it. So you can see here in the little example we've got a variable being created called A, which is not a very good variable name, but it'll do for our example. So that's giving us a small piece of the computer's memory with that name, labelled with that name, so that we can refer to it. And we're storing inside that location a value of 5. So that's what variables do and how we make use of them in programming. In our next video, we're going to start having a look at our Module 1 from our Grok Learning course and going through some of the important concepts we need to understand to be able to do those problems. So we'll catch you then.